Namaskar and welcome to StudyIQ. I am your friend Rahul Saigaonkar. The agenda for today's discussion is connected to international relations, where we are going to discuss about India and West Asian region, West Asia or the so-called Middle East from the perspective of Western countries. We all know there is ongoing conflict between Israel and Gaza. Add to this war, there are already uncertainties in this region. Now, in lieu of this war and uncertainty, we are going to analyze how India's interests are evolving in this region by keeping a special focus on transit-related projects. That is going to be the agenda of today's video lecture. To get to know this information, stay with me till the very end. All right? Before I begin, there is a small notice for all the UPSC civil services aspirants. StudyIQ's P2I program, batch 2, is closing out in a few days. 31st October is the last day to get yourself admitted. Although the course has started from October 23rd, just the orientation is over and a couple of initial classes, you can attend them again. This is the most comprehensive program for UPSC civil services preparation, where we will be with you for prelims, for mains, for interview. If you're preparing for 2024 examination, 25 or 26, we have different validities and you can choose according to your convenience. StudyIQ's motto itself, you know that we want to provide quality education at affordable prices. And these programs, they basically start from 24K, 23,999. Just visit our website, enroll now. I'll see you in the class. All right? Right. Let's begin our discussion about India and the West Asian region. Now, if you ask the foreign policy experts, they will suggest some of the important successful areas of Indian foreign policy. One of the areas would be Southeast Asia, a successful idea. I can give you an example of the Look East policy, which later on transformed into Act East policy, an area where India has done very decent. Apart from that, another successful area is the West Asian region. Now, we all know the West Asian region is quite volatile geopolitically and geostrategically both. Now, in this volatile region, India has been able to maintain its interest or has been able to fulfill its interest very decently. The entire West Asian region or the so-called Middle Eastern region from the Western countries' perspective, it is plagued by multiple fault lines. We all know there is a fault line connected to religions. There is Israel versus the Arab issue, one of the fault lines. Apart from that, there is another fault line of Shia versus Sunni. Now, you do know the Sunni leader is Saudi Arab. So, one can say Saudi Arabia and company versus Iran, which is the Shia leader. Add to this the complication of Jews versus the Arabs. When it comes to Arabs, the entire Islamic world versus the Jews, one can say. So amidst these all fault lines, India has maneuvered very successfully, especially in last 8 to 9 years. We can give a lot of examples where Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself has personally focused on this area, and we have good relations with Saudi Arab, we have good relations with UAE, we have good relations with Jordan, we have good relations with Israel, many countries, Oman, etc. In fact, we have decent relations with even Iran. Yes, the relations have gone through a lot of ups and downs because there are external factors at play. I would say a factor would be the Western countries or USA, the main factor. But despite all these things, I can give you many examples where West Asian countries have given highest honor to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. Apart from that, we have been able to maintain our interests. Now, when we talk about interests in this particular region, I can broadly classify them into 3 main areas. Yes, apart from this, there can be other interests, yes, but majorly these 3. First is the diaspora and remittances. Now, amidst this war and uncertainty, diaspora and remittances have not been impacted heavily. Why? Because the current ongoing conflict is more or less localized in Gaza, Israel and Gaza itself. It has not spread completely in the West Asian region. But when we talk about diaspora and remittances, this area, the West Asian region, it gives India highest amount of remittances. If we talk about the data from early 2023, which gives you details regarding FY 2021-22, India received highest foreign inward remittances. And if you look at the top countries, you will see UAE, Saudi Arab, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar. These are the countries from which some of the highest remittances come to India, and these have not been impacted largely. So this interest is still there, yes, and we are getting remittances, and our diaspora is also quite safe. We have run the operation Ajay to evacuate Indian people from the conflict zones. Yes. Apart from this, the second interest would be the energy security. Why? Because this region predominantly supplies crude oil to us. Crude oil, natural gas, yes, largely crude oil. And if you look at the conflict, the war and the other uncertainties which are here, we can say that we are right now at least temporarily safeguarded from any sort of volatility based impact with respect to crude oil. Now, if you look at the Israel-Gaza conflict, it began in October first week. Yes, there was some fall in the price of crude oil, and later on an increase after the conflict began. But more or less, in the last few weeks, it has somewhere hovered around $80 to $90 per barrel. So the energy security aspect is still safe. We have to keep an eye on this continuously. But the third aspect connected to transit, this has been heavily impacted because of the war and uncertainty. When I say war and uncertainty, I am not talking only about the Israel-Gaza conflict. In last year or so, or I would say in last few years or so, we have seen the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict. We have seen now the Israel-Gaza conflict. We have seen sanctions on Iran, sanctions on Russia, the Russia-Ukraine war, all these things. Amidst these uncertainties, transit is something where we can see India's interests evolving and changing as well, changing according to the needs, changing according to geopolitical development in this particular region. So let's try to understand how. Now, recently we had discussed about IMEEC, the India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. I hope you have gained all the insights into that. If you have not seen the video, you can always see the IMEEC video to get more details. But you do know that in September 2023, at the G20 summit, countries came together to announce India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, right? But even before that, I would say almost 2 decades before that, India, Iran, and Russia had already announced the NSTC before. Later on, it turned into INSTC, International North-South Transit Corridor. Now, the roots of this, they go way back to year 2000, when India, Iran, and Russia, they started work towards a north-south transit corridor where connectivity would run from the African continent towards Russia. Again, India being a very important party to this. Formally, in 2002, the INSTC was announced. Now, if you look at this INSTC, very similar to the IMEEC, which is proposed, it is also a multimodal transit route. A multimodal transit route. Multimodal means there are existing maritime routes, there is a Suez Canal route, there is existing, that means existing road and existing railway networks, they would also be connected. You can see here a sea link, then a railway link from this Bandar Abbas port of Iran, later on connecting towards St. Petersburg of Russia. So a multimodal transit mode, mainly for promoting the commercial interests, connecting India to Africa, India to Central Asia, India to Russia eventually, and then towards Europe. Now, you do know there is a Suez Canal route as well. Now, if you look at International North-South Transport Corridor, it is a 7,200 kilometer long multimodal route which connects India to Iran, to Azerbaijan, Russia, Central Asia. Now, this is something to bypass the Suez Canal route, right? Suez Canal route to connect St. Petersburg is quite long, right? The sea route itself. And from 2000, as I said, it was eventually announced, or agreement was signed in year 2002. Earlier, there were only three parties: India, Iran, and Russia. Feasibility studies were conducted. Of course, it's a long route. Multimodal transit has to be created as an alternative to the existing Suez Canal. When the feasibility studies were conducted, it was suggested that per consignment, approximately $2,500 would be saved. Along with it, more than 18 hours of travel can be reduced. Travel time can be reduced. So advantages were there, of course. And slowly and steadily, this idea of INSTC, initially it was only NSTC, North-South Transit Corridor, where India, Iran, Russia connectivity was suggested, but slowly and steadily different players joined. And today, if you look at the members of this INSTC, India is of course there, one of the founder members. There is Russia, and there is Iran. These three are the initial members, the founder members. Later on, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Armenia, Belarus, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Oman, Ukraine, and Syria also joined. All right, joined. Since 2002, the work is going on. And feasibility studies have been conducted multiple times, once in 2014, 2017, as latest as 2021. Now you are thinking, sir, if something like this is going on even before the announcement of the Belt and Road Initiative by Chinese, something like this is already there, then why did we go for this IMEEC deal? Are you thinking of that right now? I'm quite sure you must be thinking. And you want to know what is the status of this INSTC. This entire international north-south transit corridor, it has been plagued by multiple problems. Yes, there was a lot of interest initially. When it was announced, Indian firms way back in 2015-16 itself, they had suggested that we are interested in INSTC and we would be investing close to $20 billion. Now, if you ask me, sir, how much have we invested here? We have invested quite handsomely in the INSTC. The initial part, we have invested heavily in the Chabahar port of Iran. In the Chabahar port, one of the terminal is operated by India itself. We have spent more than $2 billion on developing Chabahar port. Apart from that, we have invested almost $4 to $6 billion in Afghanistan for road link and other developmental projects as well, for building a dam, for building the Afghan parliament. But after the takeover of Taliban here in Afghanistan, I would say relations have soured a little. But despite that, India has invested heavily in international north-south transit corridor. We have also become a part and parcel of the Ashgabat Agreement in 2018. All right. So we have had a lot of stakes. Now the question still stands, sir, why INSTC is there since formal announcement? I'll just write the year for your reference, 2002. From this time, INSTC is going on. It has been almost 21 years. And why there are still issues, or why this project is not complete? Because there have been multiple delays and multiple geopolitical issues which are involved here. First of all, the two important founder players, Russia and Iran, they are always at loggerheads with the Western countries. And India, I wouldn't call India a fence sitter, but India has gone for some sort of a multi-alignment with other countries. That means we have good relations with almost all the countries. We have decent relations with Russia, with Iran, with the Middle Eastern powers, with the I would say great powers or the Western powers as well. But if you look at the developments from the 21st century, this entire region has been plagued because of war and uncertainty continuously. Initially, in 2008 itself, the Russia-Georgia conflict, or the Russia-Georgia war, sanctions were imposed on Russia, an important player. Later on, Russia-Ukraine conflict, we know in 2014, Crimea was captured by the Russians. Later on, sanctions came on Russia again. Throughout this development, Iran and US relations have plagued the international north-south transit corridor. Because of Iran's involvement, or Iran's development of the nuclear program, the US had sanctioned Iran heavily, and Iran was one of the important partners, or I would say prime partner, in this INSTC, because the route itself passes through Iran. You can see the route itself passes through Iran. So if sanctions are imposed on Iran, how would it develop, or how would it invest, how would it build its infrastructure? That was the question. There was a lot of progress. I showed you that India showed, or Indian company showed a lot of interest, where they pledged more than $20 billion for the INSTC. That was during the time of the JCPOA. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, or the Program of Action, was signed between US and the other 5 partners with Iran. But later on, the JCPOA was taken back, or the Trump administration reneged on that. So uncertainty because of this. And in recent times, there is another conflict which is brewing there, or which is still going on. I would say Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, where Azerbaijan has more or less emerged as victorious. And for Azerbaijan, the supporters are whom? The supporter is Iran, the supporter is Turkey. All right. Now, from Indian side, if you look at, India and Armenia have had decent relations. And right now also, there is a lot of confusion going on amidst the Israel-Gaza conflict as well. Now, you do know that Iran has, Iran is anti-Israel, but Azerbaijan, I wouldn't call it completely anti-Israel, but it would be pro-business Israel. All right. So there are complications between Iran-Azerbaijan relations as well. Now, because of all these things, add to it the problem of financing. Now, you do understand that an infrastructure project like INSTC, it would require billions of dollars. Where would the financing come from? If Russia and Iran are involved in financing or in the project, will the financing come from the Western institutions? No. No financing came from the World Bank. No financing came from the Asian Development Bank, the European Investment Bank, or the Islamic Development Bank as well. So for funding, they have to rely more and more on countries, private entities. Apart from that, multiple projects, because of the sanctions, different companies, they were involved in development of INSTC project, a rail project, a road project, different kinds of project. At one point or the other time, Western companies, they cancel their agreements. I can give you many examples: Siemens, Stadler Rail, Hyundai Rotem from South Korea. Many of them have cancelled their agreements, because of which there has been very low progress or very slow progress over the international north-south transit corridor. Now, I hope you have gotten the answer to this question. So why go for India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor when we had already invested, or we became a part of, we were one of the founder members of INSTC? There is no harm in joining another infrastructure corridor or infrastructure development project. It is very fine. But this has been in limbo for a very long time, and this was also announced. Now, you do know this was also announced. You do know this was announced in September 2023. But now, amidst the war between Israel and Hamas, Israel-Gaza conflict that is going on right now, many people who have suggested this is the IMEEC, we have discussed this, from India to the Middle East to Israel. Now, remember, Israel is one of the important parties in this India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. Then towards Europe. Now, this is the Piraeus port of Greece. Now, this is IMEEC. After the beginning of the war, many people have already dubbed that the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor is as good as dead, even before its arrival or even before its birth. It's a nascent idea. Still, proposals are going on, planning is going on, financing methods are being thought about, but there is Western support to this. That is US-led project or US-supported project. So there are some positive signs that it might gain traction again. But as of now, many people suggest that progress will be very, very slow here as well. Now, looking at these developments, in October itself, when the conflict began, India somehow has now reoriented its interests. In the NSA meet recently in October 2023, 5 Central Asian nations, they were invited to join India, Iran, Russia corridor, that is INSTC. Now, this was announced by India's National Security Advisor Ajit Doval. The 5 Central Asian nations, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, they would be using Indian services or Indian terminal, that is Shahid Baheshti terminal at Chabahar port in Iran. So somehow it looks like that India's interests are continuously evolving, and the focus and priorities are now slowly shifting towards INSTC again, because future does not look very progressive, or future does not look very bright for IMEEC. But all eyes will now be on how India is going to handle this period of uncertainty and period of violence in the West Asian region. It all depends on how we are going to balance two important players, because as you know, Israel is a very, very important partner due to its location, yes, and due to its clout as well in the IMEEC. And Iran is, I would say, fundamental or at the center of INSTC. And in INSTC, we have invested a lot of energy, a lot of money there, and we are now slowly reorienting probably towards this. Maybe after the war ends, we will again focus on IMEEC. But as of now, many experts do highlight that IMEEC, even before its beginning, probably it's dead. But anything can happen when it comes to geopolitics. You do know that we have kept our eye on the Israel-Gaza conflict. As and when that ends, we might see a resurgence or revival of IMEEC again. Whenever there is news, whenever there is update, we will have a discussion on that on StudyIQ for sure. But I hope now you have understood that India has two options, or India, I would say, to counter the Belt and Road Initiative, to counter the infrastructure project by the Chinese. We have invested heavily in INSTC. We are also interested in IMEEC. So we have not kept all our eggs in one basket. But right now, our interests are evolving and changing because they have to evolve and change according to the volatile geopolitical situation in the West Asian region. And that is what is happening with India. That is why Indian foreign policy has been very nimble. You have to understand that in the last decade or in the last 2 decades or so, from 21st century, Indian foreign policy has been very nimble, and I would say we have shifted that that old terminology of non-alignment towards the concept of multi-alignment. We are not non-aligned we are not non-aligned anymore. We are more or less multi-aligned. We are aligned with everybody. That gives us a lot of leeway in terms of our diplomacy. Let's wait and watch what happens. Whenever this update, we'll discuss. That's it right now in this particular discussion. Thank you for watching this. Jai Hind.